Our speakers today will be Suzanne Sturdivant, who's the Director of Resident and Family Supportive Programs here at Era Living. Carrie Eaton is counselor at Ida Culver House, Ravenna, and Betsy Cruz is counselor at University House, Wallingford. Thank you all very much for your presentation today.
Hello. Thank you everyone for joining today. My name is Suzanne Sturdivant, and as Steve said, I'm Director of the Resident and Family Supportive Programs. And I really want to invite you, and thank you for inviting me to discuss what our team does on the topic of moving from isolation to connection, which we're seeing is much more prevalent now than ever with this pandemic. And as we go through the presentation, please feel free to type out your questions in the chat box, and we'll make some time at the end of the presentation for our panelists to answer any questions that you might have. So as you all know, right now, normal is looking just a little bit different than it did only just a short while ago, and that may continue to change for all of us. Many people are wondering, how are senior living communities adapting to support residents during potential times of isolation? And we have a care team in each community that has support in place, and we've developed ways that are for residents to continue to stay connected and experience a high quality of life. And one of those areas is through the support of our resident and family supportive programs. Our program, Resident Family Supportive Programs, is unique for retirement living communities. And we have a team of licensed professionals that provide several levels of support to all of our residents and support to families with an empathetic and a compassionate approach. We're working closely with the leaders in the community as part of an interdisciplinary team. And we all have the shared goal of improving quality of life and maintaining a safe environment for our residents. A few services that we offer counseling, transition support. We facilitate a great deal of support and discussion groups. One example might be our contemporary issues support group, where residents can have a rich conversation on a variety of topics. And they're able to also share their own personal stories, their perspectives, their opinions. And it's an opportunity for residents to build connection and camaraderie with one another. They might even consider a new perspective. I've often have residents at the end of such a group to come up to me afterwards and say that they were able to see a particular issue from a different perspective, and they gained an understanding and a deeper respect for their neighbors. We also offer support through the Almost Like Family program. Again, this is also unique to Era Living, where we can provide companion visits or accompany folks to their medical appointments. I've had family members confide in me that if they never end up utilizing that support, the fact that this program is available was giving them a great peace of mind. We also partner with the University of Washington School of Social Work, and we'll often have graduate students that are placed with us for their practicum site under the supervision of our social work staff. So we're going to talk today a lot about the need for social connection. Some of the reasons why we might become isolated. One reason might be we could be experiencing a sense of deep loss, experiencing grief, or there might be changes to our health or mobility, or as we're experiencing right now in the world today during times of a pandemic. But a sense of connection is a fundamental need, and each of us has our own unique way of how we find meaning in connections. Our preferences for connection, they may vary from how much social connection we have, with who, what kind of connections we have. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on identifying and meeting those differing needs. But connection is not about the number of friends you have. A sense of connection is internal. Researchers agree that the benefits of connection are linked to your own subjective sense of connection. And this is really good news because that means that you'll reap benefits if you feel connected to others on the inside. And we can help foster and nurture and build our internal sense of connection here in our communities. While social distancing is critical, it's very critical right now to provide a safe environment, social distancing does not need to mean shutting out the world. As I said, we all still need this human connection, and that's particularly true during a crisis. Feeling connected to others can lower your anxiety, depression. It can help regulate your emotions, improve brain health, and your immune system. So we're all here to support our residents for whatever that might look like for each individual. Shortly after a resident moves into one of our communities, our social work team will meet with them to help better understand their preferences, their background, what their support needs might be, and particularly during that time of transition. And our care teams work together continually to find different ways for residents to engage and connect during this time. So I just want to thank you all again for participating in this presentation. And I'm now going to turn this over to Carrie Eaton, who's our counselor at Ida Culver House, Ravenna.
Thank you, Suzanne, and good morning to everyone. As we know, and as Suzanne mentioned, each person is unique and has different wants and needs when it comes to social connection. And again, as Suzanne mentioned, as social workers and counselors here in our communities, we work to identify those needs early on by conducting a newcomer assessment and visit when residents first move in. This helps us to understand the individual preferences and gives us a baseline, a sense of someone's baseline, so that we can work with residents to find connection and engagement opportunities that are meaningful to them. Some individuals identify as being introverted, and they're energized by being alone. They need that alone time to recharge, especially after spending time with others in large groups. But introverts also still need social engagement on some level. Introverts might have an increased challenge of remaining connected to others as they age, which is important for us working in these communities to be aware of. Here are some areas that we might look out for in regards to how the COVID pandemic and isolation might be impacting individuals who identify as being introverted. Introverts are at a less risk for having problems and concerns related to isolation, even though there is a limit to how much me time even introverts need. Initially in the pandemic and during isolations, introverts tended to fare a little bit easier. One example that comes to mind, there's a resident who, within the first month or so in the spring told me, this is no different than usual life because, she really just enjoyed being in her apartment and reading. And she would, call and talk to friends and families. But other than dining, there wasn't a lot of change for her. Research and studies have shown that over the last several months, introverts have reported heightened symptoms of depression and anxiety due to the COVID restrictions. It's also important to note that introverted people are more likely to be less vocal about how they're impacted by the pandemic and isolation, and they might tend to be more withdrawn when dealing with mental health concerns and challenges. When considering how to help foster connection with introverts, They might prefer social settings that have very distinct boundaries, such as a defined beginning, middle, and end. They also might prefer those one-on-one interactions or being part of a group where they're not necessarily the focus. They also might prefer hosting or having visitors rather than going out, and activities that have a common interest with the other participants, which can make it easier for them to connect to others. Introverts also tend to prefer remote socializing through social media, FaceTime, Zoom. Reason being that they can make the choice around when and who they connect with and balance that with having that alone time, which is so important to their energetic needs. So other individuals identify as being extroverted, and they get energized by being around people and socializing, and they tend to lose their energy by spending prolonged periods of time alone. Some of the ways that the COVID pandemic has impacted individuals that are more extroverted, they tend to be at more risk for problems related to isolation. Isolation can be incredibly draining because, as I mentioned, they get so much energy by, being part of large groups and having lots of stimulation from socialization. Fortunately, extroverts tend to be more likely to reach out for help and for input and talk through those concerns when they do arise. Extroverts really need stimulation and a variety of different ways to engage. So they might be susceptible to boredom during, periods of time like the pandemic where they don't have as many opportunities. I've definitely noticed that they're missing those interactions and connections because they're really essential to their well-being. So for connection, extroverts might prefer having an action-oriented activity they can engage in, maybe being of service to their community, especially during the pandemic. There's several examples I can think of. We have several residents that have chosen to write cards to fellow residents, just kindness, reaching out and keeping those connections, going. Writing thank you notes to community members and staff, sewing masks that they can donate to their fellow residents or to other community organizations, and also donating supplies and funds to various organizations and charities. Extroverts also enjoy modified social engagements within the pandemic restrictions. So weekly phone calls, maybe video calls with family and friends, attending virtual groups and classes, having outside visits with loved ones, engaging in exercise as a way to expel energy, boost one's mood, and connect with others, either through those virtual classes that I mentioned or in a distanced masked walk with another person. And the practice of mindfulness to help cope with those restless feelings and the feeling of being stuck. I just want to note that these lists are not exclusive and that many individuals identify as being a combination of introverted and extroverted. Someone may vacillate back and forth or straddle kind of the midline, or it could be really situational. So just keep in mind that, they're not exclusive. Next, I'd like to address some considerations for how the COVID pandemic is impacting individuals that have dementia and cognitive decline. This isolation and the restrictions are especially challenging for this group of individuals. The disruption and loss of routine can really affect those individuals' behavior and their mood. We might see, them, kind of being restless and pacing, maybe some exit seeking, increased sadness and loneliness, and even anger. I'll just share, there's one resident that early on, he is a widower and consistently couldn't recall that his wife had died. But during the onset of the pandemic, was very concerned that his wife wasn't being allowed in the building. And there was an element of fear and confusion regarding her being gone and, it potentially being because of the virus. So that was incredibly upsetting to him. And just one example of how the pandemic and COVID is impacting these individuals. Residents that have cognitive decline and memory issues might not understand the isolation. They might not understand the restrictions such as masks. And these restrictions can increase their confusion, increase frustration and stress levels. I think it's also important to note that there's an increased burden for the caregivers during the pandemic. Caregivers may have gotten regular respite prior to, COVID, and that might look very different now. There's one resident that, continued to really challenge his wife. He has dementia early on in the pandemic because, he could not conceptualize the reason that they weren't going to the dining room, they weren't going to their usual activities. So, he really needed an increased amount of redirection and support and reassurance from his wife, who's his caregiver. Ways to support those individuals with dementia and cognitive decline. Establishing a new routine, because routine is so important. Some of the things we've done in my community is window waves by staff. We every day, same time of day, so it was consistent, the residents could count on it. Staff would gather and then divide into smaller groups and go to the outside of our building and go around to all the areas where there were windows and wave and say good morning, sometimes holding up signs that say, we love you, we care. Just a way to stay connected and have kind of a benchmark each day that residents could count on. Another routine to establish: window visits with families, outside visits with families. And our memory fitness program, which has typically been a group activity, has modified to provide one-on-one support for those individuals that have memory issues. And last but certainly not least, just providing, increased patience and reassurance and focusing on the positive, which I think, applies not only to those who have dementia, but to everyone who's experiencing, the effects of this pandemic. Thank you. I will turn it over to Betsy now.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now, correct? All right. Okay, well, welcome. I am going to talk about some practical coping tools for during this time of COVID for you to help you stay emotionally healthy. And really, they're pretty simple, practical tips, so to speak. So the first one is routine, routine, routine. I think we hear this all the time. Really, we should all be sticking to the same meal times, the time of day to shower and get ready to go, your dress, your exercise, and other things that you do each day. And then on top of that, we should always include something fun that you enjoy in your schedule each day. So I'll just tell you, I have become quite addicted to PBS mystery shows. There's some on almost every night. And I really enjoy watching those shows because they take me away from the stress of COVID. Another thing is get some fresh air. And I truly honor this mantra. I have 2 Labrador retrievers, so I have to go out. But taking a walk and getting some fresh air does wonders to help you feel better and get your endorphins moving. If you can't walk, try sitting in one of our beautiful courtyards or gardens. I think all the communities have a nice space where you can go out and sit. And if it's raining, a good raincoat and hat and gloves can help. And one thing to keep remembering is to keep your social distancing. You can go out and walk with someone. Cutting the time on your exposure to the news, especially the 24-hour news stations like CNN and MSNBC. Consider eliminating news notifications from your phone so you're not tempted or distracted to look at too much news during the day. Another good thing to do is to read the newspaper because it's an excellent, reliable way to get caught up on international, national, and local news with less drama. And then embrace your inner homebody. Find a project that you can do like reading, knitting, crocheting, sewing, jigsaw puzzles, crossword puzzles. I see a lot of residents doing Sudoku in the morning, playing cards, etc. Nourish your mind with positivity. Ask yourself every day, I try to do this before I get out of bed. What 2 things am I grateful for today? And then pat yourself on your back for something you've done in the day. And affirmations about yourself can be a useful tool too. So just practice positivity. Another thing I like to do is sometimes if I'm getting into a negative space is do some thought stopping, like stop thinking that and transfer yourself to something positive. And finally, ask for help. Seek help if you need it. And as Suzanne said, you know, connecting with others is huge during these uncertain times. Lean on a friend or your family who can listen to you. And every community has a social worker or a counselor available to assist you. So another thing I found that was really that could be useful is an acronym. I can't even say the word. And the acronym is Face COVID. And so I thought I would go through each of those and talk about them. So face COVID. So F is equal to focus on what's in your control. During times of stress, it's easy to get lost in worry and ruminate about things that are out of our control. The more we focus on what's not in our control, the more we feel hopeless and anxious. The more hopeless and anxious we're likely to feel, So things like COVID virus itself helpful thoughts spinning around in our head and painful feelings in our body is important. So one thing we can do to do that is use ACE, and the ACE formula. And that is acknowledge your thoughts and feelings. Do this silently and kindly to whatever is showing up inside of you. Your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, memories, sensation, and urges. You can put this into words like, I'm feeling anxious, or I'm feeling sad, or I miss my good friends, things like that. And then come back to your body and connect to your body and do something like stretching, shrugging your shoulders, focusing on breathing slowly, pushing your thoughts away out of your head. It's progressive relaxation. Recently, I've been studying mindfulness meditation for a group here at work, and it's amazing how much it's contributing to my own personal well-being. Finally, engage in what you're doing. Refocus your attention on the activity you're doing. Drop anchor by switching off of autopilot and engaging in life to ground and steady yourself in difficult situations. Disrupting and obsessing and worrying really won't help you. And so engaging in something, some activity or something you can do will help you. And then finally, C, committed action. What can I do right now, no matter how small, that improves my life for me and others I live with, or people in my community? Recently, I had a friend whose husband passed away. And so the other day I got a nice card and a bottle of wine, and she lives a few blocks from me, and I walked by her house and dropped it off. Okay. So opening up, and then the opening up will help you make room for difficult feelings. Acknowledge your feelings are normal and allow the feelings to be there, but treat yourself kindly. Finally, values. What do you want to stand for in this crisis? What sort of person do you want to be as you go through life and this crisis? How do you want to treat yourself and others? And then finally, I'm sorry, I said finally before, but identify resources. There are many resources out there to help you and assist you. And if you need help finding resources, the counselors and social workers in our community can help you with that. And then this is one we all know: disinfect and distance. Wash your hands frequently, wear your mask covering your mouth and nose. Practice social distancing for you and the greater good of the community, and don't cut yourself off emotionally from your support systems. So in conclusion, these are really challenging times. Unfortunately, the numbers, COVID numbers, are growing. And so we need to be more careful again after opening up a bit. So I can really appreciate the challenges that these changes and the growth of COVID put in front of us, but really treat yourself and others kindly. Thanks.
Hi, I'd like to take this opportunity to take any questions that folks might have. Steve, for some reason, when I'm sharing, I'm not able to see the chat, the questions.
We have no questions in chat at this time. You can
Okay.
unmute if you want to ask a question if you're on video, or you can submit your question in the chat now if you have them. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. If anybody has any questions, now would be a good time. Otherwise, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up our presentation today. I wanted to thank Suzanne and Carrie and Betsy. That was very informative. We have a question from Dale. Can you see that question, Suzanne, or did you like me to give it to you?
Sorry, I cannot see it. Would you be able to read it for me?
Yep. Sure, absolutely. Dale Age is asking, do you offer support services to people in independent living also?
Yes, we absolutely do. So our support services are available to all residents in all of our communities, regardless of their service level.
Great
all
question.
inclusive. Yes, thank you for asking.
Any other questions? All right, then we'll conclude. I wanted to thank you again, Suzanne, Carrie, and Betsy. You guys did a great job. We appreciate all the information you shared with us today. And we will email a copy of these slides to all of the attendees, along with a survey sheet that we'd like you to fill out and tell us about your experience on the Zoom event today. And if any questions come to mind, you can always email us as well and ask us directly, and that email direction will be on the slides that we send to you. So thank you so much for your attendance, and we'll conclude with that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.